Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Christopher McGlothlin, and this is The Ghost Show. Right there, our show's entire budget. Right there. You just saw it all. Well, good evening again, everybody. Again, I'm Professor Christopher McGlothlin. I am very, very, very blessed to be the creative pit boss of Ghost Show Press, a small but mighty voice in the world of creators' rights. We do books about outre genre things like horror movies. And tonight, we're not going to talk about my stuff anymore after that because we have a guest I'm absolutely thrilled to have. Been such a big fan of this of his company and his stuff, and that is Mr. James Aquilone. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with him, he runs Monstrous Books, and they, my friends, they've taken guardianship of a great piece of genre culture. They're going to be doing books about and relating to the one and only Kolchak the Night Stalker, one of the most beloved cult properties ever. Now, you may know him from his previous Kickstarter, where they produced this big, beautiful anniversary collection of new and original Kolchak stories, which is just amazing. Seriously. I mean, if you see a way to get a copy of this that doesn't involve going to jail, get a copy. This thing is from my heart, from a kid who watched Kolchak during original broadcast. You will love this. This is what you've been waiting for. And the reason he's with us here tonight is because he has launched a Kickstarter, an incredibly successful Kickstarter, but that's not going to stop me from posting the link to it here. To bring back Jeff Rice's original Night Stalker novel in a brand new restored edition with celebrity introductions, restored material, and so much good stuff going on. And the good news is you still have 4 days to back it if you want to get in on the ground floor and get your copy. All righty. So James, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, this is going to be fun. I love talking about Kolchak. So, I've been talking about Kolchak quite a lot, really over the last like 2.5 years, and it never gets old.
Living the dream, huh?
Yeah. This is definitely a dream come true to have the rights to do Kolchak stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Looking forward to this. And joining us also tonight is the godfather of the Banff family of podcasts, Mr. Mike Lafferty. Mike, how you doing this evening? Mike, you're on mute. Mike, you're on mute,
Sorry,
buddy.
I have a very loud. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. I had a very loud Great Dane in the next room who was making beluga whale noises. I didn't want to disrupt you guys with all that. It's been a little hyped up since the 4th of July. But no, I'm pleasure to be here. Love Kolchak the Night Stalker. I'm really psyched for this project you guys are doing. So, hey, if anyone's listening, they're not watching to us, they can't see the link on the screen. tinyurl.com/KolchakBook. Take you right to the Kickstarter. You've got 4 days left. You guys are wildly successful, over $80,000 raised. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And it's great to be talking to you.
All righty. And I will go ahead and yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. And also joining us from his armed compound somewhere in Utah at a secret unknown location is the one and only Mike Weatherford. Now, Mike is not only a proud and longtime contributor to the Ghost Show family of books, ages before we ever met. Mike wrote a fabulous book, which quite frankly saved my sanity at one point in my life, Cult Vegas, on all the weird and wonderful things that have happened in Las Vegas, all the stories that could only have happened in Vegas collected in one spot. And okay, well, let's see here. I'll be fair. Okay, and if you'd like to grab a copy of that, there you go. That's in the chat. If you like, check that out. And Mike worked for 20 years working the entertainment beat in Las Vegas, walking in the footsteps of Jeff Rice and Carl Kolchak. And so, a great pleasure to have you here. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. If you can hear me okay, like the other Mike, I too am hiding from a dog in here. But yeah, and more recently, to hold up the prop, the Nevada Humanities Council put out this little anthology and let me do a kind of more personal first person thing about ever since I was a teenager. I just felt like my fate was somehow entwined with Jeff Rice, even though we never actually met. In a way, it's like the weird parallels and how I kind of ended up here. I owe a lot of how I ended up in Vegas to actually watching the Night Stalker on TV when I was 12 years old.
Wow. Wow, it's great. As somebody who has a journalism degree and has spent the last 5 years with his boss constantly threatening to fire him, it's amazing how this I can relate. But hey, let's James, how did you get into Night Stalker? How did you find Carl, or how did Carl find you?
Well, it's funny because I also have a journalism degree. So yeah, we got to thank Kolchak for getting us into this horrible industry. So I'm also an entertainment reporter for radio broadcast. So I moved out of newspapers and magazines, a few years ago. So yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Kolchak, and I was, a fan of things like, Superman, and who's Clark Kent, who's also a reporter. So it seemed like being a reporter would be really exciting and fun job. But my career has been mostly behind the desk, and no monsters or any giant robots had to fight or anything like that. So when I get to do Kolchak, so like that's really coming full circle.
The moment where you set out to be Carl Kolchak and you wake up one day and you realize that you've become either Ron Updike or Miss Emily. And hey, I will be the Miss Emily of my office proudly.
Oh, absolutely. It's tough being a reporter and have to go out, on the street and knock on doors. And I did it for a little while. I was an intern for the New York Post, and that cured me of really being a reporter. So I'm an editor now, and I do I do my little entertainment reports. I don't have to really get involved in that stuff on the streets, which is so I really have respect for people like Carl Kolchak, because it takes a lot of guts to do that, and you have to really be really tenacious and be willing to be a pest.
Yeah,
and I point out in that Feather Show essay that the Woodward and Bernstein gave me a lot of cover, because journalism schools were getting flooded because of all the President's Men and Watergate and everything. And it was real easy not to tell people that it was man, it was Kolchak and Lou Grant show on TV that were pushing me into it.
Yeah. And I think we owe Carl, even though I found a disappointingly few numbers of vampires and werewolves during my time. The thing in the show where like everybody you run into is just absolutely out of their minds to one degree or another. That like, thank you for warning me about that. Thank you for not exaggerating that aspect of the job. Oh, okay. All right. So, all right. So, all right. But let's see here. All right. So, James, now, I would imagine that thanks to years of reruns, the wonderful Blu-ray set that Kino Lorber put out, and the sort of retroactions you got from the X-Files, there are probably a lot of, and following Svengoolie every Saturday night, I'm guessing there are probably a lot of people that are familiar with video Kolchak, but you're going back to the original novel. Would you like to talk a little bit, maybe if somebody is not aware of the novel, like some differences between what they're going to see in print?
Yeah, I was surprised that a lot of people didn't know about the novel, or that it came from a novel, but I think that's because the novel didn't come out until about almost 2 years after the first TV movie aired. So Kolchak began as an unpublished novel. Jeff Rice, who was a reporter in Las Vegas, wrote this manuscript. Supposedly he finished it on October 31st, 1970. And then he sends that manuscript to Richard Matheson's agent looking for representation. The agent then just turns around without signing Jeff, and then sells the script to I think ABC or Universal, and then signs his client Richard Matheson as the writer of the TV movie. All of this done without Jeff's awareness or him being signed. So then Jeff was kind of forced into then signing with the agent. So he kind of didn't get off on on the right foot with Hollywood and all that.
Mhm.
But then the novel doesn't come out until the end of the 1973. So
Mm.
the first TV movie came out, The Night Stalker came out in January of 72. Then The Night Strangler came out the next January of 73. And then the novel came out at the end of the year. But I guess before the TV series started. So people were already very familiar with Kolchak and kind of saw Richard Matheson as the writer of those two TV movies. So I think Jeff didn't really get, the acknowledgement, for being the creator of Kolchak. Because when people talk about Kolchak, they talk about Darren McGavin, they talk about Richard Matheson, Dan Curtis,
Yes.
so they don't talk as much about Jeff, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this project and try to put the focus on Jeff.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, Mike. Now, you like I said, you've written an essay about Rice personally, and I understand that he had some troubles toward the end of his life, and could you tell us a little bit about Jeff Rice?
Sure. I mean, I'm not the ultimate expert on that, and I would quickly add that I never met him, but it was weird. I wrote most of Cult Vegas kind of at the dawn of the popularized internet, where we were all kind of getting our dial-up modems and first starting to kind of connect. But it still was kind of hard to find people, and I really didn't know where he was, and it turned out he was in L.A., but eventually moved back to Vegas. But yeah, I guess it's not too much of an overstatement to say all the drama over this kind of overwhelmed him and got the better of him, and he was never the same after that, and he kind of ended up his life in diminished circumstances. And when he died, and my colleague John L. Smith ran an obit column about him, that I realized that he and I had both lived in Vegas in his final years, and if I'd tried a little harder, I might have found him. But maybe to back up and go back to the relevant early part, he was a reporter at the Las Vegas Sun, and the biggest story I ever found his name on was Elvis and Priscilla's wedding at the Aladdin. So he covered that for the Las Vegas Sun. And yeah, I guess he was like an early version of a lot of us guys that thought, we cut our teeth at the newspaper and toil and then write that screenplay or that novel and hit the big time, get a taste of the good life.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just like Carl at Elvis and Priscilla's wedding. I'm like, somebody needs to write that. I'm sorry. Writer brain.
He was only like 27 or so, I think, when he wrote this or when the book came out, and he had been named an outstanding journalist of the year by the Nevada Press. But he modeled Kolchak over a veteran reporter at the Las Vegas Sun, and I later found out that in their obits, actually 2 veteran reporters at the Las Vegas Sun claimed to be the inspiration for
him. Wow, it's gonna be. It's the nerdy journalism equivalent of who is you're so vain about. That's amazing.
This was that squarely in that era with the guys that had the flasks in their desk drawer and they smoked at their desk and everything. You get a taste of that in the book.
My editor used to call that the golden age of journalism.
Yeah. I'm glad I got the end of that. It was kind of a sad thing when a features editor had to quit smoking at his desk.
Oh,
we were relieved and sad at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mike, glad you're back with us. How did you get into Kolchak?
I always like watching late night movies. I stumbled across them. Oh boy, in college, studying or not studying for a final, and Kolchak was on. Oh boy, it might have been Night Flight, might have been one of those other late night shows. Just happened to stumble across them, and at the time, I was working part time as a freelancer at a news weekly back in Indianapolis. So I'm a fan of journalistic protagonists, and I enjoy 70s horror in general and just kind of fell into it. So yeah. I never knew there was a novel though. Appreciate you guys bringing that to my attention. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, as a longtime fan of the show, the novel is amazing. It really, really, I was not expecting it to be as different and good as it was. So yeah, so I highly recommend it for readers.
I just ordered the ebook, so I'll find out soon. Oh, hey, longtime commenter Sean Vera is saying good evening. So Sean, good to see you, sir.
We said hello to Sean. Always good to have Sean aboard. I know he's a big Kolchak fan. All right. Sorry. Hey, all right. Let's see here. So, let me ask James this first of all. Okay. There's so much. There's a Facebook page I'm on called Groovy Doom that's posting like old TV listings from 1974, and you get to see what episode of Kolchak was on and like what it was up against. And you look at it and it's on at the same time as shows like the Texas Wheelers.
Yeah.
And the Planet of the Apes TV series that most people have forgotten existed. What do you think it is what is it about Kolchak that we're still talking about it 50 years later, and the fandom, I mean, arguably probably more people now that were watching back in 1974.
Yeah.
What is it about that keeps grabbing us about Carl?
I do think that Kolchak is probably more popular now, although it was a record-breaking TV movie. I mean,
yes.
TV movie at the time, it was the highest ratings for a TV movie, and in the original printing of the novel, there's like a note in the beginning of it that claims that 75 million people tuned in, which sounds crazy. Because that's like those are like Super Bowl numbers now.
Yeah.
But I guess 75 million people could have tuned in. Like the top show at that time would get like 20 or 30 million viewers. So I think Kolchak didn't do that well. It was down at the bottom of the ratings, but it was getting, which today would be a hit. It got like 7 or 8 million viewers a night. I think in the ratings, it was maybe just ahead, just below Kung Fu, which also debuted that year and only lasted one season. So there were a bunch of shows that kind of lasted too. But Kolchak was a really different show. There really wasn't anything like it before, and it went on to influence tons of shows. I mean, most notably the X-Files. So I think the X-Files really did help to revive it. It had like a little bit of a renaissance in the 90s. So when the X-Files came out, Chris Carter, the creator, was very vocal about the X-Files being inspired by Kolchak. And then Kolchak started to air, the rerun started to air on cable. I think it was on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yes.
So it kind of was revived there. And I think it's got a revival now because of MeTV that airs it every Saturday. So, I just think it was just like a different type of show that spawned a lot of other popular shows like the X-Files, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Supernatural is very reminiscent of Kolchak. So, that's the original, and it does hold up. I just watched Horror in the Heights last night, and I was like, this is a really good show. It still holds up. It's funny. I mean, it's still actually like legitimately funny, and the writing was just top notch. From the TV movie to the TV series, they always had great writers in
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing I do have to give credit, a special credit to, for Mark Davidziak's classic companion and also the new Keener Lord Blu-rays, is pointing out how the series has aged so well because of David Chase being story editor for most of it, long before The Sopranos was on his radar.
Yeah.
And it's so funny for a Sopranos fan to go back and you still got these eccentric urban characters and that like really snappy dialogue. And you can kind of see Chase's fingerprints over a lot of scripts that he doesn't get credit for because of writer's rules. And what an to go from Rice's great novel to have Richard Matheson and then David Chase work on a property. That's a pretty good run.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Richard Matheson is like the king. So, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better writer there. I mean, he's the only guy who he dominated every medium that he was involved in. Short stories, novels, movies, TV movies. That and it just goes on and on. It's insane. I don't know anyone who's done that. Stephen King didn't do that. So everything he touched was just amazing. So just to start it off with Richard Matheson, and then David Chase was the story editor. But then you had episodes that were written by Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis.
Yes.
I think it was one of their first jobs. Was that script? So that's crazy too. So they had a lot of great writers. So I think kind of like Doctor Who, where they had great writing, but the production values were crap. But in the end, that doesn't matter. If you had great writing and you had great acting, no one cares if the monsters look really cheesy.
What are we going to slap on Richard Keel this week?
yeah. So I mean, no matter how ridiculous the monsters look, it's the good writing just shines through.
And Mike Weatherford and I, being both big Hammer guys, we're going to praise Horror on the Heights. We have to point out that was written by the legendary Jimmy Sangster, who wrote the early great Hammer films like Horror of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein, and that was a real streams crossing for us horror obsessed kids back then. All right. Well, okay. All right. Let me see what else we can talk about here. All right, Mike, you were around in the Vegas of that era, and I know in Cult Vegas you talk about how that's almost a character in the novel and in the movie. How does the real Vegas show up in the novel?
Well, what is amazing about the novel now, and I would say that what's amazing about it is the way it kind of captures the Vegas of that era. And I will qualify quickly that I was still a little kid then, so it wasn't my era exactly. But when I arrived in Vegas, it was still kind of the tail end of that era. That said, though, I think what's commonly said about the book, and it's I say it's pretty true, is that everything is in the book, but there's also a lot of things that don't go anywhere in the book, and that Richard Matheson went in there and just found it. He just expertly pulled out the things that needed to be in the movie and got rid of a lot of stuff that didn't. But so that said, when you go back and read the book now, it's those things that are kind of detours and sidewinds and characters that show up and hang out with Kolchak in his apartment and then disappear, and restaurants he goes to. And that's the part that now is this fascinating look at that early Vegas. And sure, it didn't need to be in the movie, but he name checks very specific locations, and you could tell this is the life he lived, and the bars he went to and the restaurants he hung out at. And you really get a taste of this little Vegas that was like 200,000 people back then.
Yeah, it predates Jaws, obviously, but you get that there's sort of that weird resonance about this kind of like small town corruption. Like you could kind of totally see Murray Hamilton's mayor. You couldn't wear the cool anchor jacket, but still, you're gonna see him lecturing everybody about how we got to keep a lid on this.
And Mark, you pronounce his name better than I shall attempt to, as the ultimate expert on all this. And like we were saying earlier, Kolchak was modeled on older reporters, but the attitude is pure Jeff Rice, and that cynical attitude he had about the cronyism and the law enforcement in this town. There's other echoes of it, weirdly enough, in a movie called Hell's Angels 69, where you kind of get the attitude of the kind of the protective sort of redneck sheriff type cronyism. The sheriff's name was Ralph Lamb, and I will point out that names are changed in the book, so they're based on people, but the names are changed. And that attitude about, they're going to run him out of town is pure Jeff Rice. And what's the line in the book? James might be able to help me, but about if you're the cops are always looking if you're looking for dope, and especially if you're young and black, at little lines like that are in the book that weren't going to be in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, the book is definitely, it feels and seems like it's written by a reporter. Because it has, so I'm saying, like, he gives so much detail to, like, the autopsies, and stuff like that. And there's a lot of research in it. A lot of the information you get is through research. And I was saying before, Jeff is a character in the book, which is something you don't get in a TV movie, because the conceit is that Jeff meets Kolchak after the events of Las Vegas, and then Kolchak gives him the tapes or the papers, detailing what happened, and then it's Jeff Rice who's then publishing these papers, and then Jeff inserts like little comments and notes throughout the novel.
He changes names, and in a few cases he changes. I think the vampire's house at the end, I've never been able to figure out exactly where it's supposed to be, and I think that might be for a reason. Now, of course, in the movie, it goes back a lot, and it's this cool Gothic house with a staircase, and it's exactly what it needs to be in the movie. In the book, it's like a little single-story stucco Vegas house, and you wouldn't be creeping around in it for more than 10 seconds before you found out whether the vampire was there or not. But the chase, when the police chase the vampire, that's in both the book and the movie, that I really carefully, when I did my Feather Shows essay, I really carefully read that sequence in the book, and I plotted out, and I'm like, yeah, the cops really could chase this vampire from here to here to here, and this is actual kind of the grid of the streets and where they're going all really adds up and makes sense. And if you want to hear something really weird, the place where the first victim is found, I'm like, well, there's he talks about an alley, and I'm like, okay, there's not many alleys in Vegas, it's too young a city and stuff. But he talked about where 8th Street ends right across from Las Vegas High School, and the old Las Vegas High School is now the Las Vegas Performing Arts Academy. That's where my daughter went to school, and that's where we dropped off carpool kids. And the place that I let them out, there's an alley right next to it, and it has to be exactly the place where the first victim bought it. And again, one of those weird parallels with this book in my life,
Oh well, I've just added that to my Vegas tour. I gotta find a cabbie or an Uber driver who will take me to the alley next to the one, because I totally don't have a sinister purpose here. I promise. Oh gosh! All right. Yeah, but you're right. There's so many neat little censored bits that I appreciated the novel, like finding out that Gail Foster wasn't just a showgirl. They can actually acknowledge that she's a prostitute, and I don't want to spoil this, but if for people who haven't read it, but the victim, when they find the victim, Scorsese's victim, they can't get into in the novel because they find out one of his victims is a transvestite. And the comment that the police department has about why Kolchak really needs to keep that part of the story quiet is just, I want to laugh out loud funny there. Hello, Mike. Mike Lafferty, good to see you back here in another location.
Yeah, sorry, I had networking problems on the other laptop. So
okay.
Interrupt your anecdote, but I am back. Yeah.
No, that's fine. You were trying to pipe in, and we were having audio problems. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk as soon as we were able to get technically back online here.
That it was a thing of the moment. You were talking about corruption in Vegas. I was going to say, wait, you're saying there's corruption in Vegas in the 70s? No. That was all I was going to chime in with. So there's gambling in this establishment? No.
And not to stray too far from the novel, but casting craggy-faced Claude Akins as sort of the face of Vegas corruption, it's just so glad this was made in the golden age of the character actor, because you just see Claude Akins and you know everything you need to know about that town. It's right there in that magnificent, distinctive face. I thought that was perfect casting.
The vampire, there's a lot more explanation of how they figure out who the vampire is in the book. And again, Mark is like the ultimate expert on this, but I think Jeff's father was, I believe, had a jewelry store at the Dunes. And you can kind of tell from the book that the Dunes is the most connected place. He names the restaurant there. There was the show there, or actually 2 shows there, and the show producer's name was Frederick Apcar. And again, one of the names that's changed, he doesn't use his real name, but you can tell that this is who he's talking about, who identifies the vampire, because he's like, I've had shows and I used to have the show back in Paris. And yeah, I recognize this guy and he doesn't look any older. And so that's another way he just anchored it in with the real Vegas of that year.
Oh yeah, so many great details in this. And like, okay, here, I gotta get, okay, here, yeah, go back this seriously. If you haven't, go back this. You get to read all this stuff here. All righty. So James, by the way, congratulations on the massive success of the Kickstarter and being the guardian of the Kolchak legacy now. Have you thought about where you want to go next? Is there any spoilers you can give us about where you may be heading next with the property with Monstrous Books?
Well, the next thing we're going to do with Kolchak is a comic book project. Ooh. So now we'll get more into the original stories. I can't divulge anything more than that, but it's going to be a pretty big comic book project with a bunch of writers, and we'll probably do it this fall. But after that, we're going to do everything. We're going to do Kolchak comics and Kolchak novels and Kolchak short stories. You're going to be sick of Kolchak soon.
Okay, I think I have a vague enough yes or no question here, where I think we can make people happy and not give anything away. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, I bought this and loved it, and was completely jealous of the amazing array of writers that you're able to assemble for this. Now, if I bought this and was very, very happy with it, will I be seeing some of these folks again?
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah, we'll probably work with, I mean, if they wanted to, they're all amazing writers, and I was really happy to work with them. And if any of them want to write anything else, in the Kolchak world, I would definitely have them. But yeah, I mean, most of them are Kolchak super fans, so I don't have to really, persuade them to do anything else, involving Kolchak. So that's the easiest thing in the world, is to get people to write for Kolchak. I get a lot of emails.
Oh yeah, because I mean, as somebody is just a fan of creators being allowed to create, I was really, really, really happy with like how many familiar names were in here, and I was delighted to see some old favorites. But there were so many people in here who were new to me, and I just, as somebody who's done a little bit of publishing, I felt so good that you were willing to give maybe some creators, maybe not as well known as some other people, a chance to work on this. And the diversity of the voices and just the different flavors that you can get off this one property. I thought this was such a well done anthology, and compliments to you, sir, on finding and supporting that array of talent.
Yeah, a lot of the writers came later, because like Rodney Barnes, and I found out that he was a huge Kolchak fan, so we added him. It was supposed to be 100-page book, and I think it's 250 pages. So we went way over budget. Steve Niles joined the campaign in the middle of the campaign. Once the campaign started, I started getting tweets from people saying you should put Steve Niles in there. He's a big Kolchak fan. And then Steve Niles chimed in, and I'm like, I'm a huge fan. So I ended up tweeting him, and I go, are you for real? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So we started adding a lot of people. And there's some people that we couldn't add because like I said, we doubled the budget, and it was getting a little scary because I was funding everything. So there were a couple of people we had to say no. I mean, David Dasmalkian, he contacted me at that time, and we were thinking about putting him in, but at that point, we were way over budget, and it cost a lot of money to do a graphic novel. Every page can cost you $300, $400. So I was like, oh man, I don't think we can do it. So we ended up not putting him in. But I said, like, as soon as I have another Kolchak project, you're the first person I'm going to call. So when I had this, he was the first person I called, and he was like, yeah, okay.
Now that yes, please. Now, while getting back to the current Kickstarter, you got to talk about Dasmalkian and all the amazing people that you have doing guest spots in this. Please tell us about the people that you've assembled in and around Jeff's novel.
So we have David Dasmalkian, who's the star of Late Night with the Devil, which is a great movie that just came out a few months ago. But he also is a comic book writer. He does a comic book called Count Crowley for Dark Horse, which is really cool, and it's very much in the spirit of Kolchak. So I asked him to do a forward, and he said yes. And then we got Rodney Barnes, who wrote a story in the graphic novel. The 50th anniversary graphic novel, and also does comics himself. He writes pretty much everything. They just announced him. He's going to do a Batman comic. I think it's the first DC thing, but he also does Philadelphia. And then he's a huge Kolchak fan, so he wrote the afterword. And then we have Mark DeWidziak, who is he is the Kolchak expert. So he knows everything. He was friends with Jeff. So he's gonna write a piece on Jeff. He's gonna write a profile on Jeff because I wanted that in there. So he did lead an interesting life, and I think his father actually owned part of the dunes. Which became an issue with the book that he wrote, because they weren't happy that he wrote this book about the corruption in Las Vegas. And like Carl, he supposedly got booted out of, and he was not welcome in Vegas supposedly after that. So so Jeff came from a wealthy family, and he grew up in Beverly Hills, but he was very much like Kolchak, and he kind of like I guess I don't know if he disowned his father, but he just didn't go in with that life, and he was just a poor reporter. So they weren't happy with him, and the dunes does show up in the novel. So he kind of like made himself persona non grata in Vegas. So it is funny how it kind of paralleled the whole Kolchak storyline too.
And you pointed out in a way it was probably good for him that the book came out after the movie aired, because the Sun, predictably, as you would, they were proud of him the day before the movie aired. They were like, former Las Vegas reporter has his movie on. But again, the names are changed. But the Las Vegas Sun's publisher, Hank Greenspun, and there's a line in there that says something like part genius, part charlatan. And I don't know if they would have run that piece if they had known that the book that would only come out later slams his former boss man there too.
Yeah, and then I think the novel does deal more with the corruption and the cover up than the movie does, and I think the novel really probably focuses more on that than even the vampire.
I think so too, and one thing the professor kind of hinted at about the, it does foreshadow Jaws, but it also it goes into a little bit more detail about this kind of duplicitous attitude that Vegas is being marketed as this free-for-all town, but yet, they were real uptight about narcotics and porn, and so this weird disconnect that like we make money off the tourists, but we're gonna run a clean ship for the locals.
Yeah,
and that's all in the book there in various places.
No, I just saw Jaws last week, and I'm watching that and I'm going, this is the Night Stalker. It's
Yes.
because in the novel, and I don't remember if it's so much in the TV movie, but in the novel, a lot of it has to do with that it's Memorial Day weekend's coming up, and they don't want to lose the tourists and scare them, away from Vegas for Memorial Day weekend, which that's right out of Jaws. So I was like, this is Jaws, but with a vampire instead of a shark,
Oh,
So that's weird. But then the other connection, of course, is Richard Matheson. And I think his first TV movie was Duel, which was directed by Steven Spielberg.
yes.
And then Richard Matheson wrote Jaws 3. So yeah, it's all connected.
Not as
We'll
fine
get
as
more into the X-Files, but it's all connected.
Yeah, I've also, you could also draw a parallel about the fact that I've always thought it was funny is that that Rice was content to show government corruption, but is relatively muted about the mob influence at the time.
Yeah,
And I'm not retroactively mad at Rice for not wanting to tick off the '70s Vegas mafia.
right.
But in Benchley's novel, and then they pick it back up in Jaws 2, you find out the real reason the anchor-coded mayor is really doing this is because he's taking out all these mob loans. And unless the summer beach season is a success, he's gonna wind up buried in a hole somewhere. So yeah.
The book and movie are supremely uninterested in gambling, and that is really unusual for.
Yeah.
I mean, how many books and movies have been about they come and this is our last chance and playing it all down on the green felt jungle. And I believe in the movie there's just one shot of it inside a casino that at least as far as showing the gaming area, and I can't really remember the book now. James might chime in, but I don't. It's a Vegas book that isn't about gambling at all.
No, that's true. Yeah, it doesn't really deal with too much with the casinos or gambling or anything like that. Yeah.
And again, it can't be overstated that you really see it through the eyes. I mean, you can find where his apartment was. I mean, I pretty much could tell where he lived. The building's still there, and the things like the Mario Puzo Vegas book and Larry McMurtry's Desert Rose. I think those were kind of the point of view of a visitor that kind of came in and looked around and, hey, it's okay for a novelist to use their imagination, but no other book that I've read just has that real lived-in quality.
All right. So, Mike, you been to Vegas? You a Vegas guy? Mike Lafferty?
Yeah, I went to Vegas once. Not a big Vegas guy. I don't drink the way I used to. If I was drinking the way I was in my 30s, I think I'd be much more of a Vegas guy. But yeah, I saw Penn and Teller. I didn't see any vampires unless those creepy guys wearing the gold paint on the strip. That would explain a lot. I kind of like those guys as vampires, but it was all right. I haven't been back. Although that sphere looks pretty interesting. You guys check that out?
No, I haven't seen it. All right. Well, okay. So as soon as we wrap up the next Kickstarter, I'm renting a convertible. You and we do a Fear and Loathing weekend. Mm-hmm. There you go. We get another book out of that.
That is not bad. I'm up for that. So James, it sounds like you're doing more comic books, more novels than Kolchak World. Are we thought about games yet, or anything else?
Maybe.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. Yeah. There's gonna be other projects that we I can't announce anything now, but yeah, we're talking about other stuff.
Okay. Well, we also cover, Chris and I both previously dabbled in tabletop games. If you guys had to go that avenue, let us know. Would love to talk about that on this podcast as well. So.
No, yeah, I've talked about that with some people were telling me though that it would be hard to do a Kolchak role playing game since it's like a lone protagonist.
That's fair, and there would be design challenges, that's for sure. On the other hand, solo RPGs are kind of hot right now, so. But yeah, it's a lot.
I would love to see that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I hate to bring up the Kolchak reboot because it seems like such bad mojo.
Oh, boy.
But one of the things I thought that really didn't work was trying to turn it into a team adventure. I thought that threw the whole chemistry all off.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole appeal of Kolchak is that he's this lone crusader. He's on his own, and no one believes him. So that's what. Yeah, I mean the reboot. I didn't understand that at all. It didn't make. I mean, you can't do Kolchak or anything called Kolchak without the hat and the suit, and you can't make him look cool,
Yes,
he's a good-looking guy, and he had like a cool I think he was wearing like a leather jacket. Stuart Townsend, right? Was that
yes.
Yeah, he was married to Charlize Theron, and he was
yes,
he was much cooler than Kolchak. He should be like a slob and unkempt, and that's what I love. The TV show, he wore that suit every single episode. I was watching, I was like, even Tony changes his suit throughout an episode. He has maybe 3 suits in an episode, but Carl had the same exact suit, same shirt, same tie, every day.
What was McGavin's line about? Like he got fired from a big New York paper sometime in the 50s and has never been able to afford another suit.
But in the TV movie, he does wear a different suit. He has the beige suit. I think the first time we see him in a suit, he's wearing the beige suit. So they did switch back and forth between the blue seersucker suit and the beige suit. I don't know in the Night Strangler if I don't know if he wears the beige suit or he's just always in the blue. But in the TV series, he's definitely wearing the same exact outfit every episode. Even Archie Bunker always wore the same shirt and pants too.
Well, in the 70s and 80s,
all his journalism majors not. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, they weren't afraid to have rumpled-looking heroes in the 70s and 80s. If they rebooted today, I mean, if you rebooted Columbo today, it'd have Brad Pitt playing him or something.
Right.
Well, I'm sure you know, the rumor for years was that Tim Burton was going to redo Night Stalker with Johnny Depp as Kolchak.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, it seemed so wrong in the 90s, but now that Depp is like more weathered and has clearly had some life experiences, it's like now 20 years later, it's like, no, I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
It's like the way he made his Hunter Thompson movies in reverse. He made kind of the prequel Hunter Thompson when he was older with the Rum Diaries, and then he was too young to make the Fear and Loathing.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
In a way, though, it's like Tim Burton and I had this uncanny overlapping interests, and in a way, I was kind of like, does Tim Burton have to do my whole childhood? Could somebody else have a crack at it?
Did he do the Dark Shadows reboot? Was that Tim Burton?
Yeah, that was Tim Burton.
Yeah, maybe he lost his. Maybe they should take away his ability to do 70s reboots for a while.
He tried to warn us with Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But before I forget, you talked about how wonderfully rumpled Carl is. I kind of smiled in Davidziat's book where he talks about part of the reason that Kolchak may have struggled was he's this rumpled hero with an atypical name on the air at the same time, roughly the same time as like Kolchak, Banachek, like all these other lone rumpled guys.
There was even a show that was on earlier that same night called Kodiak. At 8:00, Kodiak. I don't think that lasted that long, but that was on at 8:00 on Friday night, and then Kolchak came on at 10. So I don't know why you would do that. Have 2 similar sounding shows, confuse everybody. I thought they just misspelled They either misspelled Kolchak or Kojak, but it was called Kodiak. And
There's been more than once I've heard someone talking about the old Telly Savalas show, and I'm like, oh, you mean Kolchak? Oh, you mean the other.
Yeah. If I'm the oldest one here to have to point out the obvious, the only one to watch these when they aired, the TV movie was a phenomenon, and they had promoted it for weeks, and it was on a Tuesday night, and the ABC Tuesday movie of the week was a big deal. Now, by the time the TV show came on, it was on Friday night, and a lot of teenagers that had watched it in '72 were old enough to drive on Friday night now, and no VCRs, you know, so might be one reason why it didn't fare as well.
Friday nights were never a good night, and it was it was out at 10 o'clock on a Friday night too, so that was not a good time to air. But that was I was just looking at the night it debuted, and that it was every show. I mean, on all the networks. Planet of the Apes debuted on CBS. $6 Million Man was on NBC that night, and then you had Chico and the Man and Sanford and Son, which I think were the top shows that night.
Yeah, you weren't drawing a whole lot away from
night, Friday night.
Oof. All right. Well, gentlemen, it's let's see here. We're kind of down into our last 10 minutes for our for our scheduled time here. And James, you've been wonderfully forthcoming about things you've got coming up. But just checking. Anything else you want to plug before we wind up down? Anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, we got the Kolchak Kickstarter will end Thursday night, and then after that, I think I'm gonna take a vacation. Yeah, these are exhausting, these Kickstarters, and then because we got, we got to gear up for Halloween time when we have a ton of projects and things coming out. So, yeah, and there's so much going on that I can't talk about. So it's always like there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's gonna be plenty of Kolchak stuff. So I'm just hoping that the fans will keep following us.
Absolutely.
If we did like a game, and hopefully they're into that too. So I'm hoping that they don't get enough of Kolchak.
Oh, I never have. I thought about bringing my Carl Kolchak refrigerator magnet, so that I've had for the last 30 years. So I can't make a sandwich without Carl holding up a cross. And so yes, I think the appetite is there. All right. And Mike Lafferty, you what's happening this week on the Banff family of podcasts?
What I can recall off the top, I think I have a show in about 5 days doing some RPG promotion, which is pretty far afield from Carl Kolchak. So let's just let it go at that. But James and Mike, it's been a real pleasure talking to you guys again. Or James, this is the first time we've talked.
Hey, the story about Carl finding a monster at Gen Con and not being able to find him among all the cosplayers, that is yet to be written.
Yeah.
All righty. And Mike Weatherford, at your hidden when you emerge from your armed compound, do you have some things you're working on, or anything new stuff coming up with Drive-In Kings? I
continue to try to self-publish my Drive-In Kings, a 1977 comic book about hapless teens of that year, hurled through the movie screen into the world of all the fun drive-in flicks back in the era when drive-ins were both a place and content. The type of movies you saw there. And the first two issues, I guess you got to hit that bumpy patch of road. The third issue just is taken forever. It's finally about ready to go to the printer. And I hope then if I can find a trade paperback publisher that can keep the price down, I want to reprint the first three in a very short campaign that paves the way for issue 4 around Labor Day.
Oh yeah. Okay. And before we leave, if you kind of gentlemen will indulge me for just a moment, it's so fortuitous we're talking about Kolchak this week because of Kolchak. I made one of the best friends I have ever made. I did a convention about 10 years ago in Richmond, and wound up on a seminar with the beloved writer C.J. Henderson, who, if you're a fan of the good folks at Moonstone, you may know the good stuff C.J. did in general, but specifically the Kolchak stuff that he did for them. There have been very, 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 very few people who have gotten the Tony Carl dynamic as well as he had, and we turned out to be the only people who showed up for our seminar, but rather than take a big kick to our writer ego, we talked about upcoming projects. And CJ gave me this great talk about, like, everything's an opportunity. Hey, why is there nobody here? Maybe the zombie apocalypse happened and it's up to you and me to get through it. Like, we should write that story. And we stayed in touch for years after that, including through his very, very, very brave battle with cancer. And this past week was marked the 10th anniversary of his passing. And I thought that this would be a great opportunity to take a minute to remember CJ and to thank him for the encouragement that he gave him. And on behalf of all of us who love Kolchak, to thank him for his contributions to it. And I hope the stuff that he did over the years was never forgotten, because he was a great writer and a great, great human being. So CJ, this is for you, my friend. All righty. And speaking of friends, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in doing this. I can get a chance for a bunch of old Kolchak fans to get together. This is wonderful. And to all of you that joined us live, and to those of you that may be streaming this years from now, what a Kolchakian thing. People finding this years after the fact. Thank you all very much. And one final note, please keep an eye on this channel and BAMF announcements, because we have some exciting Ghost Show press news coming up very, very, very soon, which we'll get into at a more appropriate time. But James, Mike, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you all for joining us tonight on the Ghost Show. We will be back soon, and thank you all for tuning in.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.